My grandmother always told me that I reminded her of her son, Peter. My grandmother was very spunky and very funny. She grew up in Scotland, in a wee little town outside of Glasgow. And when she was 17, she said to her boyfriend at the time, John, I'm moving to America, so I'm breaking up with you. Bye. And she came here to the United States, and she ended up in New York, and she was there for a little while as a dancer. John came here to find her, and they got married and had my mom and my Uncle Peter. There's more to the story, but that's the nice version, isn't it? And they lived outside in the Boston suburbs, and my Uncle Peter was kind of a wild man, from what I've heard. He loved all things Scottish. He would go to Scotland, and he actually he bought a kilt, because you need a kilt if you're a real Scot. And he bought a spurrin, which is like your little bag where you hold all your stuff in that didn't have pockets in the kilt. But he bought a piper spurrin, which is the long, hairy. It's a horse hair with the two tassels on it. It's beautiful. But ironically, Peter is not a piper, just so you know. But I have his spurrin because my Uncle Peter is no longer with us. He died in a car crash. It was a drinking, driving accident, and there were 2 cars involved, and my Uncle Peter did not walk away. And my mom would always also say that I reminded her of Peter, and that Peter was a wild man, and he loved his whiskey, and sometimes when he had his whiskey, he would have some whiskey with his whiskey, and he would not want to come home from Scotland, and he would run around, and he did come home. And my mom, when I went off to college, was like, "Now just be careful when you're drinking that whiskey." I was like, I know. But when my grandmother, when Peter passed, I don't know if my grandmother and grandfather were embarrassed or shocked, or it was just too hard to live in a society where they had a life with their son who's now gone, so they moved to Florida. And that's where I met her. We would go down and visit, and see the mouse and do all the things, and spend time with her grandparents and the gators in the backyard. And she would always tell me stories about how to survive this world, and tell us little tidbits of information like a bean is a bean, but a pea is a relief. I'm like, that's not exactly things we need to know. But then my grandfather passed away, and they moved back to Massachusetts. So I got to hang out with her in my 20s. I had hair, it was a long time. And she was very theatrical, and she loved theater and shows and things, and that's kind of how I feel like I got into it. But one night, I guess she went to the show with my mom. We took a cab into the city, and by this point she had this like weird Scottish Boston accent. So she's like, "Come on, Elsa, get in that car. We're gonna be late for the show." And you're like, "That's it." But like her little accent, and she said my mom's name, and the cab driver turned around and was like, "Excuse me, are you Catherine? Catherine Craig? I was friends with Peter. Yeah, I was there the night he died. Yeah, I don't think it was him that was driving. It was the other car, some off-duty cop. Anyway, enjoy your show." My Uncle Peter was laid to rest in Scotland. And not too long after that, my grandmother passed. And I never got to talk to her about it, but when she passed, she wanted to be laid to rest in Scotland, so we brought her home. And knowing that my grandmother is with her son does make me smile. Thank you.